All right, so today is lesson 7 called the quarter note. We're just going to delve into that a little bit more and continue to lay this solid foundation for our music reading skills. All right, so we know the drill. Review time. We're going to just start by reviewing that we learned there's a staff. The staff consists of 5 lines and 4 spaces. We number them from the bottom to the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines and 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. We're just going to go ahead and draw note heads now. So we're going to draw a whole note on line 4, and we're going to make sure it's centered right over line 4, and we're going to go ahead and draw another whole note on space 2, and then we're going to draw a half note on line 2. Since it's on line 2, we're going to put the stem on the right side and it's going to go up, and then we're going to draw another half note on space 4. And since it's on space 4, which is above line 3, we're going to make sure it goes down on the left side. All right, so we also learned that we'll need a clef sign at the leftmost side of the staff if we want to decode the pitches that are on the staff. We learned about a treble or G clef, which we can draw by starting on line 2, bump up to line 3, down to line 1, up and around, and back down again. And X marks the spot. So this curly Q action here all centers around line 2. If we were to put a whole note there, that whole note would be given the pitch G. From there, we can decode all the other pitches on that staff. So again, this is called the treble clef or the G clef. We also learned about a bass clef. And the bass clef, or F clef, would start on line 4, bump up to 5, half a heart, down and around, stopping just under line 2. We'd put a dot next to it, 1 in space 4, 1 in space 3. These 3 points together help us know that this line 4 is very important. That would be the F, right? And from there, again, we can decode all the other pitches we need to sing or play. So again, this is called a bass clef or an F clef. All right, so to review our note value pyramid today, again, we're going to just draw it together. So we're going to start with the whole note, which is just that open note head. We can think of that as being equal to a whole pi, and we'll call that a whole note. This is the longest note value. We'll hold it for the longest duration. We can take that whole note and split it into 2 equal parts, and we show that by just adding a stem. And this would be equivalent to half the duration of a whole note, or we could think of it as half a pi. So this is a half note. We can take that half note, break it into 2 equal parts, and we just represent that by filling in that note head. Right, and these are going to be called quarter notes because each of them will be equal to a quarter of the value of a whole note, or we can think of it as a quarter of a pi. Right, each of these can then be broken into 2 equal parts, which are going to be called eighth notes, right? And we just represent that by adding either a flag or a beam, right? So these are eighth notes. Okay. And then we also learned we could break each of these into 2 equal parts. Just going to draw like that. Oh, I don't know that I said an eighth note would obviously be worth an eighth of the duration of a whole note, right? So we're just going to draw groups of 4 here with 2 beams and then little note heads. 1, 2, 3, 4 16th notes would be the equivalent of 1 quarter note, or 4 16th notes could equal 2 eighth notes, or 2 16th notes would equal 1 eighth note, right? So again, these are called 16th notes, and they would be worth a 16th of the duration or a 16th of the value of a whole note. All right, and reviewing again that the most important thing we're learning at this stage with regards to note values is that the only thing fixed at this point is the relative value of these notes. So we can know that it is always true that a whole note is worth twice the value of a half note. A half note is worth twice the value of a quarter note. A quarter note is worth twice the value of an eighth note, and an eighth note is worth twice the value of a 16th note. We cannot at this point assign any specific beats, number of beats, or duration to these notes because these notes are not yet on a score where the composer has provided additional decoding information. So one scenario could be that the composer will tell us that a half note is worth 1 beat. From there, we can know that a whole note would be worth 2 beats. A quarter note would be worth only half a beat. An eighth note would be worth a quarter of a beat, and a 16th note would be worth an eighth of a beat. But we cannot know that until the composer has given us additional decoding information. All right, so we're now actually on to lesson 7, which is quarter note. If you hear pounding in the background and during this video, I apologize. My husband is working in the garage, and this is my opportunity to get this done, so it is what it is. We're just going to read through this together. Again, you don't have to write this, but I think it's helpful to cement the learning. At the very least, I want to go through this so that you can at least follow along and sort of think through the process. So a quarter note looks like this. Again, we have a filled in note head with a stem, and it says 2 quarter notes equal 1 half note. A quarter note lasts half as long as a half note, or we could say it has half the duration of a half note, right? Half the value of a half note. And again, he kind of does this ruler image, right, where a quarter note receives half the length or half the duration of a half note. So to draw a quarter note, begin by drawing an oval, which is the note head, right? So there's our whole note. Now fill in the note head, right? And then add the stem, right? So right there, okay. All right, and it says sometimes the stem goes down, just like on a half note. And of course, then it will go, just like with a half note, on the left side of the note head, okay? And then sometimes it will go up, and it will be on the right side of the quarter note. It says trace each quarter note shown below, then draw 3 more quarter notes to the right of each one you traced. So we're just going to draw 1, stem up, 2, stem up, 3, stem up, and then we're going to trace this guy, stem down on the left, note head, filled in note head, stem down and on the left, filled in note heads, stem down and on the left, and another filled in note heads, stem down and on the left. Same thing as with the half notes. The quarter notes look like this on a staff. The stem goes up when the notes are below the third line, right? So these notes are all below the third line, and the stems will all go up and on the right side. And then the stem goes down, starting at the third line. Again, there are exceptions to these rules. Like I said in our last lesson, actually a lot of people would say that the note, when it's actually on line 3, you will put the stem in either direction depending on the majority of notes in that measure. Also, when you're beaming multiple notes together, if they span across that area where the stem would switch to either up or down, you'll pick the majority. The majority will rule, basically. And so a note that would ordinarily have a stem going down may end up having one going up. So these are not hard and fast rules, but generally, yes, you can look at your scores now and you can see that they will always follow this rule. All right, so on to our final page here. Some review and more on the quarter note. Draw a quarter note on the line or in the space shown below. Make sure the stems go in the correct direction. So again, there are actually rules about how long these stems need to be, but we're not at the point of being able to talk about that quite yet. So just kind of try to follow along as best as you can. So this is a quarter note, oopsies, we need a pen, in the second space. This would be a quarter note on the second line. Again, we try to center it over top of the line. And then on the third line, we'll follow their rule for now. So it's going to be a stem that goes down and on the left side. On the fifth line, again, center it on the line. And again, we're going to need to put a stem going down and on the left side. And then in the third space, so 1, 2, 3, and again, a stem going down and on the left side. On which line or in which space have these quarter notes been placed? So again, 1, 2, 3. So this would be space 3, and you notice how nicely it fills out that space. This is going to be space 2, and then of course line 1, and then space 3. It says, are there more quarter notes or half notes on this staff? Circle the correct answer. Okay, so we know these are half notes, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it, right? And now we have some quarter notes. So we have 1, 2 filled in note heads, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So obviously more quarter notes. Music, math, circle the example that is correct. So is it correct that 2 quarter notes would equal 1 quarter note? Well, probably not. And how about 2 quarter notes would equal 1 half note? Sure, that makes sense, right? Because this is the next level down. We filled in the note head, so we know that makes sense. True or false, circle the correct answer for each. Is it true that 2 half notes would always equal a quarter note, or a whole note? 2 half notes would equal a whole note. That is going to be true, right? And again, it may end up being that this whole note gets 8 beats and these each get 4 and 4, or it may end up being that each of these half notes ends up being given 2 beats and then this would get 4, right? Or it could end up being true that each of these are given 1 beat and then this would get 2. But either way, the math is true. The ratios are correct, right? And then we're also asked, do 2 quarter notes always equal a half note? Well, that's also going to be true, right? Because we know this is the next level down from a half note because we've added 1 notation element. All right, that's it for today.